Hi, Kenzie. This is Mr. Hausman. We're going to take a look at some of the essential notes that you need to examine for this last unit of physics. So it is the fourth term, and we are concluding the year with something called simple harmonic motion and waves. But you'll finish with simple harmonic motion, and it's pretty cool. So a good way to wrap things. Okay. So if I had to describe what's going on, so to speak, I would say that we are here. We're going to take a look at something called simple harmonic motion. It's got an acronym SHM and resonance, and that's going to be some of the last things you're responsible for. The next week, yes, you'll be here for part of it, but I will be a little bit reasonable about what I put on the final exam for you, is we're going to look at waves. And how can a wave, right, an ocean wave or a sound wave or a light wave, have anything to do with pendulums? What's the connection? And the catch is that they do things that repeat. They are repeated motions, and what they do is it involves moving energy, okay, or energy being transferred from one place to another in the process of maybe vibrating like a mass on a spring. A mass on a spring literally means a mass bouncing up and down. A pendulum, most people are familiar with like a grandfather clock. Let's go to the next page. So, where do we start? So, have you ever heard of a bobblehead? The little toy that when you flick the head wobbles back and forth, but it has a rest position, and so do pendulums, and so do anything that oscillates. So an oscillator is anything that experiences periodic motion. Periodic is an adjective that means repeating itself in a fixed amount of time. And an oscillator has a repeated motion, right, that is continuously returning to a given position, right? If it starts here, it goes over to one side and it comes back. Or you could start in the middle and go back and forth. But basically, when it bobbles back and forth, to and fro, it returns to a given position in a fixed amount of time. So it's very predictable, hence why we use pendulums in clocks. Let's go to a slightly smaller pen size so we can see this a little bit easier. Okay, so let's do some vocab. So some important vocab. What's a cycle? A cycle, like a pendulum moving back and forth, is the name given for anything that repeats itself going back and forth, forward, backwards. The way that we measure this motion, besides counting the cycles, is we measure the frequency. The frequency literally means the number of cycles that happen in a given amount of time. And so therefore, the unit is hertz, or cycles per second. That's named for a famous scientist who characterized light waves. And I think I also did a messy job over here, so that's how you spell frequency. The next way of measuring this repeated motion is the period. The period is the time for one complete cycle. So the symbols for frequency is an F. The symbol for period is a capital T, because it is a time after all. So you measure the complete time for one pendulum swing. So what kind of objects besides a bobblehead do this? Well, a pendulum, and we're going to be responsible for understanding this in detail. Then there's these other types called inverted pendulums, like a meter stick or maybe a baseball bat. Imagine a bat being balanced by the grip down here. And if you balance it, it's going to swing back and forth, but it's going to swing back and forth at the top, right? It's going to oscillate back and forth. It's called an inverted pendulum. And this thing is a scooter, right? But it has a handle on it. Some people use this for getting around cities on tours. And it was created by a robotics company, and it's called a Segway. And if you lean back and forth, it either rolls forward or rolls backwards. The other kind of simple harmonic motion that repeats itself, oops, I forgot to mention that, simple harmonic motion, is a mass on a spring. And we did a little bit of that in class. Other things might be a violin string. They repeat themselves very predictably. And then here's a really hard one. If you go into chemistry, you'll find out that even atoms and molecules have frequencies to them. And it's a characteristic of that molecule. So you can actually use that to identify what material you have. So those are some examples of simple harmonic motion, but we're going to focus on pendulums first. So let's go to the top of page number. I've actually lost track of what page we're on. Let's go to the top. Let's go look at the bottom. We're on page 4. Okay, you just flip to the next page. So the first example is of a simple harmonic motion oscillator is a simple pendulum, like a clock or like a swinging mass. And here are the words we need to know. This is referred to as the bob. There is a middle position. Remember we talked about how they have to return to a certain position? The middle is called the equilibrium. So I just wrote mid, right? And the bob swings from the left to the right and back. And a couple other characteristics we're going to talk about are the amplitude and the length. The amplitude is how big is the swing? Is it 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees? And the length, of course, is how long is the rope or the cord or the cable. So all oscillators have a resting state, or we would call that the equilibrium position. Oscillators have a resting state or an equilibrium position, right? That is a key characteristic. Their amplitude, which really means the bigness of the swing, how big is the swing, is measured in degrees, and you may remember that symbol. That's called the theta. It means how many angles. And I think you might have experience with radians. Maybe it depends on your math class. So your amplitude would maybe be, here's an example, 30 degrees, or I bet you remember that there's a way of doing that with pi radians, okay? I will not make you be converting those back and forth. Let's go to the next area, and this one's the challenging one. So angles, length, equilibrium position, those are just places or characteristics. Now, what is the cause of this motion that swings back and forth? And I bet you can figure out that someone obviously has to lift the pendulum, and then you let it go. And the letting it go allows the force of gravity. And where is it in this picture? I'm going to zoom in. The force of gravity has two directions. So here's the normal, here's the typical force of gravity. But because we're swinging in a circle, we are going to talk about the components of gravity. And here's the important one. Let's kind of circle that with a nice dark line. Oops, that's going to be huge. There we go. But that's the big one. And this is the restoring force. The restoring force pulls the mass, right? Here's the mass or the bob, back toward the middle. So let's do a blue line that's pretty bold, okay? And there's our restoring force, okay? So it always pulls you towards the equilibrium or toward the middle position. And the restoring force actually changes. So this would be easier with an actual pendulum swinging from your ceiling. But the higher up it goes, if you were to lift it here and let it go, it would accelerate a lot more than if you let it go from here. And that's because the restoring force is greatest or largest the further from the equilibrium point. Actually, the better word is farthest from the equilibrium point. And it is 0 at the equilibrium. So the force of gravity, actually, because it has an angle to it, and we're talking about the force of gravity toward the middle, it actually changes. The further out you go, the bigger it gets. But here at the bottom, the force of gravity toward the middle is 0 because the only force of gravity is downward. There is no sideways component to gravity. And I told you that would be kind of the hardest one to kind of wrap your head around. But just know that the force of gravity is the restoring force. That's the force that keeps it swinging, right? The cause of the swing. And it not only does it pull it down toward the equilibrium, but when it swings on the other side, right? When the pendulum swings over here, it slows it down. So here, on this side, our force, gravity in the x, would be toward the middle. It's always toward the middle. So let's review energy. I bet from a couple of months ago, you hopefully remember that kinetic energy is energy of motion. So when the pendulum is going its fastest, it has the most kinetic energy. And that happens when it's at the bottom. So the KE is biggest when the pendulum is going the fastest, right? So at the very bottom, right, it's going the fastest, and so therefore your kinetic energy is maxed out. Where's the potential energy biggest? Well, that's when it's up high. So because there's a force acting on it, it has energy, and the energy changes from potential energy, and it's biggest out here, right, the potential energy, and then as it swings back down, it turns into kinetic energy. By the time it gets to the other side, it goes back to potential energy due to gravity. That should be review, and maybe you want to think of it like a roller coaster, right? The potential energy is big at the top of the hill because it has the greatest height, and then the kinetic energy is biggest at the bottom because obviously things that roll down hills, that's a little roller coaster, they're going fast, okay? Some wind lines showing that it's going fast. Here's a page that we modeled 2 problems on, and then I asked everyone to do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it was a classwork assignment. So that's one of your first tasks, is to complete page 5 and 6. Let's do an example. So what if we're trying to find the time of a pendulum swing, right? So the period of a pendulum is its T, capital T. And I see a new formula in the upper right corner. The period of a swinging pendulum is calculated by multiplying 2 pi times the square root, so it's a little complicated, of the length of the string divided by the gravity of the planet, right? 9.8. G is 9.8 meters per second squared. We don't worry about negatives. Why? Because time has to be positive, and if we had a negative g under the square root, well, it would not be doable because it would be imaginary. Do you remember that rule that negative square roots, they are something, right? You can have a negative under a square root, but we call them imaginary numbers. So there's no imaginary here. So we would plug in 2 pi, right? Let's go to the next step. Square root, what's the L? The L is 0.8 meters, 0.8, divided by the acceleration due to gravity. So not 0.8 meters by 9.8 meters per second squared. So what do you do first on your calculator? Well, that's really up to you, but I would actually just plug it in as I see it. I would type in 2 times pi. Find the pi button in your calculator. 2 times pi. Sometimes you have to press a second function to get it. Sometimes it's right on the button. Then times the square root. Find the square root button. And in most calculators, that should open a parentheses. And I know you can't see what's on my screen, but I'm doing it live on my calculator. 0.8 divided by 9.8. I wish you could see what's on my screen. And then you close the parentheses. So this goes in the parentheses. And you hit enter, and you should get 1.8 seconds. It really is much longer, but let's round it off. So that looks pretty easy, I hope. Now what happens? What if we are given the t is 1.5 seconds, and I say find the L? So you think to yourself, okay, I can set this up just as well as anyone else, L over G under the square root. But do you notice the unknown is over here? And that means we have to move things away from L. So the first thing I would do is divide both sides by 2 pi. So I'm left with t over 2 pi equals the square root of L over G. And in class, I asked everyone, what do you think the next step is, everyone? And they said, well, some people said you multiply by G. And I said, nope, can't do it. You need to remember to get rid of the square root by squaring both sides. Then this square root and this 2 go away. And then our last step is we have L over G, and we're going to multiply both sides by G. So you get L equals 9.8 times 1.5 over 2 pi quantity squared. And this is where, I'm going to zoom in on this, that's not easy. And you're like, well, no, it doesn't look that complicated. The most common mistake people make is they forget to put this in parentheses. Maybe you do the parentheses first, in fact. So I'm going to type in 1.5 divided by parentheses 2 pi, close the parentheses around the 2 pi, hit enter, and this whole thing comes out to be, and I'm going to use a much smaller pen so we don't run out of space, 0.239. But I have to still square that. Then multiply it by 9.8. So parentheses first and then powers, or is it the other way around? So 0.239 squared and you get 0.0569 times 9.8, and you get a length of 0.56 meters. And lastly, let me use a slightly smaller pen, but you still use some good colors, right? What if G is the unknown? What if we know the L is 0.9 meters? What if we know the T is 3.2 seconds, but we don't know what planet we're on? Well, we're on an imaginary planet X. That's not a real planet, and I want you to find G. So you might think, oh, it's totally different. No, it actually has a lot to do with number 2, L over G. Okay, so step 1, divide both sides by 2 pi. 2 pi, 2 pi, gone, gone. Are you used to it? Square this, gets rid of that square root. Now we have L over G again. And you're like, oh, it's the same thing. No, this time what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by G to get the G out of the bottom. See how G is now on the left, but it's in the top? And now we have to move all of this away. So let's rewrite that. G times T over 2 pi in parentheses squared equals L. But we want G alone, right? So we're going to have to divide both sides by T over 2 pi squared. Whew. So number 3 is the trickiest algebra. So if you want to summarize that, G equals the L, 0.9, over T, 3.2, over 2 pi, and all of that has to be squared. Yeah, some people can do that all the way on their calculator. How about you do the part in the denominator first, and then we'll finish with putting 0.9 over that. So I'm going to take 3.2, divide it by parentheses 2 pi, 0.509, but I'm going to square it. So the entire denominator is 0.259. I think we actually got that for part of our answer up above. And now we have to take 0.9 and divide it by that answer, 0.259, and you get a G on this unknown planet of 3.47 meters per second squared. So it's really just the algebra that's nasty. The equation doesn't get, it's not 2 equations, it's only 1 equation. Once you get it rearranged, then you're just plugging and chugging, and just watch out. The number 1 mistake is forgetting to put the 2 pi in the parentheses underneath the 3.2. So that was 3 examples, so it made the video a little longer. I would like you to do number 4. It has a little twist to it. And then the good news is on page 6, number 5 is just like number 1. Number 6 is just like number 2, and number 7 is just like number 3, and number 8 is very similar to number 4. So that should give you some good accessibility. So I'm going to send this off to you, and hopefully this helps you get caught up on simple harmonic motion notes.